I'm going to begin with a story about Luella. Some say that Luella is a miracle child. Luella's American Indian. She graduated from high school. She's the first in her family to attend college. She went on to graduate school, and now she's a political leader in her community. She also came from modest circumstances, living on the economic margins, her family not always intact, attending a struggling school. Luella is not a miracle child because she received the kinds of supports necessary for learning success. Deficit thinking has figured into the educational lives of American Indian students for some time, to the point that there can be assumptions and even expectations about who can succeed and who cannot. What if we move away from thoughts of disadvantage and underperformance and instead focus on the skills and the strengths and the capabilities that children develop in their own contexts as bridges to learning? All societies socialize their children to behave in ways that allow them to be meaningful contributors to their own communities. The education that American Indian children receive at home follows particular protocols for interacting, for decision-making, for problem-solving, like any community. However, some of the forms of teaching that elders and others use to pass on learning to new generations can be very different from formal schooling in U.S. classrooms, where for the most part, best practices are based on ways of knowing and doing derived from the dominant culture. With better understanding of effective educational practices in different cultural communities, schools can be more inclusive, teachers can be better prepared, and students can come to school confident in who they are, with emotional well-being and ready to learn. Now, for American Indians, educational reform agendas across the generations have not only been ineffective, they've been actively destructive to achievement and emotional well-being. Cultural trauma, a lot of it played out in boarding schools, arose from the assimilationist policies, and continue to contribute to things like cycles of addiction, lack of self-efficacy, and the dismal graduation and retention rates. English-only policies continue to contribute to an erosion in the use of heritage language, and ultimately in cultural activities. Family dislocation has stymied the kinds of intergenerational teaching and learning that are at the core of Indian life. All of these elements combine to form the perfect storm in Indian education. So in contemporary life, many Indian children speak only a few words of their heritage language. They can't communicate with their grandparents who are monolingual speakers of that language. And they live too far away from their family ranches to participate in farming activities, attend ceremonies, and other cultural activities. Experiences like this inhibit achievement, but they prohibit the level of family engagement that's so essential to learning success. Now, Indian communities are asserting their educational sovereignty. For example, in the state of Montana, legislation is in place that ensures that Indigenous perspectives are integrated into curriculum, professional learning, and resource development. In the state of Alaska, where just about everybody has something to do with hunting and fishing, teachers draw on this lived experience to make connections to the content they teach in mathematics and science. And this also leads to clearer connections to career choices. For example, if your family manages wildlife and habitat, you might think about being a conservation biologist. If you regularly process plants and herbs for medicinal purposes, you might think about being a pharmacist. Now, to carry this a little bit further, I'm sharing this image with you, and I want you to think about what you think about it. I'm sharing this with you because it's a pretty good replica of what a 5-year-old created for me when I gave her a set of Cuisinart rods and said, oh, just create anything you want. And she came up with this. Now, when I show this to people, they ordinarily say, oh, well, what a lovely young artist, or that's a great piece of artwork. And that's true. But another way of thinking about it is, well, gosh, look at the complexity and look at the structure. Maybe she's a budding design engineer. Often American Indian children are not given these options, these opportunities for making choices. And that's challenging, but it's wrong, and we need to do something about it. What we need are more Indian voices at the education tables. We need more Indian people participating at all levels in education, and that'll shift things. And then we can bring in policymakers to execute changes. So if all of these things can be put in place, then schools can be more inclusive and expansive, and teachers can make deeper connections with their students. And those students will be in position to make meaningful contributions to their communities. Thank you.